Welcome to this word of hope for the Saturday of the second week of Advent, the year 2022, December 10th. Welcome to our chapel here at St. Dominic Priory in Denver. I'm Father Luke. Today we have this dialogue between Jesus, the Pharisees, and also a dialogue with the Old Testament, when we have this figure of Elijah that's told and retold through Sirach, the prophet, about Elijah's being taken up and that great prophecy that Elijah has to come again on the eve of the coming of the Messiah. And Jesus is talking with the Pharisees about John the Baptist, or even the disciples about John the Baptist, and the question about, isn't Elijah supposed to come back before the Messiah does? Questioning Jesus' own claims about being the Son of God, the Messiah, the one who is to come. And Jesus points out, he says, but Elijah has already come. You guys didn't recognize it. That question, I think, is an important one for us. What do we expect to see? And what do we hope to see, particularly when it comes to the things of God? And we know, particularly around Christmas, that our faith is chock full of different examples about how expectations are upended. For example, Jesus being born in Bethlehem in a manger, instead of that sort of regal way of coming in, fine clothes with an army, leader of a nation, etc., etc., etc. We can always find examples that we expect things that are not necessarily the way God sees the world. And we always can fall into that temptation about expecting what might not actually be what God is hoping to show you, or where all the breadcrumbs have been led for us to see. Just like with the Pharisees of the day, Elijah coming, all of those signs that would point to Elijah's role was fulfilled in John the Baptist. And yet expectations kept them very narrow in what they allowed themselves to see. And at the very end, it says in Sirach, "Blessed are those who have seen and have fallen asleep in your friendship." I think then that's tied to our hope. Our expectations can set up our hope, and whether our hopes are fulfilled or not. What do we hope for, really? What is our hope dependent on, particularly when it comes to things of Christ and the coming of Christ? Because if we allow ourselves to enter into that dialogue with how God has presented himself, the plan of salvation from the beginning through to the time of Christ to us today, we can still look around and say, I expect the faith to look like this, or sound like this, or be like this. Christmas must have X, Y, and Z. I know I'm praying if I'm feeling X, Y, and Z. If our hopes are dependent on that, we might find ourselves losing hope a lot. Let us spend, as we enter into the last phase of Advent, that moment to allow Christ to speak, God to speak as God does. Let the silence of Advent ring in our ears and behold the wonders and the marvels that God has in store for us. God bless.